curious, I really liked your criticism of Esselin's reading of the theater of the absurd and bringing out those nuances. I think it's very clear Dee and Gogo both, they certainly are not just amorphous characters. They really do over the course of that play. If you have the attention, you definitely see that they are distinct characters. I'm curious if there's anything for you that you do see as salvageable or compatible between your reading of Godot's philosophical underpinnings that you show and Esselin's reading of it. Is there anything from Esselin that you see as salvageable?
Oh, I mean, I like his general discussion of the theater of the absurd. I think he traces out good themes. I think he puts it in a very good historical context. The thing that I tend to disagree with him on is, I didn't write it in this paper, but I've written it elsewhere, that he seems to put too much stock in the author. He kind of makes the author a god, in a sense, by saying that it's the inner reality of the author, etc. And so it devalues the reader, it devalues the audience, I think. And so I don't like that particular aspect of it, which is why I decided to take this approach. And he says specifically, the theater of the absurd is not like the theater of existentialism, because there's a moral lesson or a philosophical lesson or something like that attached to it. And I said, well, just because there's a lack of a message per se, or explicit message, does not mean that we can't see philosophy informing almost every aspect of the theater of the absurd. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Jeff, I'd like to ask you about the idea of absurdity, that how you develop your argument of duality with the absurdity. Do you think that the duality between these two characters, or between the philosophical investigations, they contribute to the absurdity, or did it? If it is then because of the incommensurability that is up, or leading to the absurdity?
What?
Incommensurable.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Well, let me see if I'm trying to formulate this. So you're asking me just why I read it as a duality and why I see it?
I mean the relation between the duality and the absurdity.
Oh, right.
Because you are from the philosophical background, I'd like to know more about this.
Yeah. Well, with the absurdity, well, basically, I mean, I think Esselin's right when he says that the characters, in a sense, are kind of unrecognizable. We can't relate to them, right? But it does seem that just because the absurd in general is concerned entirely with the human situation and human existence, I was taking that to be where it connects up with philosophy, because, as I said, philosophy is an anthropocentric endeavor. It's all about humans and humans' place in the universe, and humans observing certain laws of the universe and all that. It all comes back to the human's interpretation of reality. And I basically said philosophy got us to where the absurd is now, saying that, you know, with the death of God, with the loss of truth, the loss of meaning in language, etc., all these philosophical ideas that predate the absurd are all informing the absurd. And so that's how I saw it connecting. Is that what you were kind of asking for?
Yeah,
like how the absurd connects up with the duality in the philosophy?
Yeah, especially I mean in the context of waiting for Godot.
Well, just because, I mean, well, in the context of Waiting for Godot, well, I think Godot is very much what Esselin, when Esselin is formulating his idea of the absurd, it seems to me that it's almost entirely with Beckett in mind, because Beckett's plays really match the themes of the absurd. So, in that sense, I mean, philosophy is just, it's informing the whole thing. I mean, I just see it as at least the conclusions of philosophy are where you see the world of the absurd. I mean, yeah. Sorry, it took me forever to get there.
Well, I don't know if this question is too nasty, but want to do a little bit contribution.
Yeah. No problem.
I don't want to gang up on poor Jeff here, but
Okay.
quick question. I found it really interesting that you bring a lot of different philosophical traditions to bear on this, and in fact, philosophical traditions that are contradictory in a sense, that work against each other in some ways. But I find it nice that you sort of point to the sort of binary strain in all of them. That most of these are seeing this sort of dialectic. Right? You map that onto Beckett's play. Does that then turn the play into a critique of binary thinking in a sense?
Yeah.
This sort of lack of a resolution there. I mean, is that sort of where you see this going?
Yeah, definitely. That's why I try to invoke Derrida, and I try to invoke Nietzsche, and I do invoke Lyotard too. Lyotard says the self is not an island, and I see, perfect example. Perfect illustration of the postmodern self is we're so fragmented and we're so interconnected with so many other people that it is a with world, you know? But yeah, it definitely is a critique of binary thinking because, the postmodern world is a world that is beyond binaries in a sense. So I'm using binaries to get us in there, but the binaries aren't stable.
Right.
I'm just showing how we can get in there. And then from there, try to sort out the mess of the binaries. They start spinning and turning, and the self and the other, I see Didi and Gogo sometimes both occupying those roles. Master and slave, I sometimes see both Pazzo and Lucky occupying the roles.
Especially because even when you start elaborating the different characteristics that you associate with those two, sometimes those characteristics themselves don't really cohere.
Exactly.
Sense, right? And so.
Or they're also repetitive, right? Like with Didi, he takes off his hat, he looks inside, he does that whole repetition, and then Gogo does the same exact repetition with his foot. So it's just a simple, it's almost polar right there too. That's polarity. So, yeah, that's why I said this is not a definite interpretation. This is just a way to get inside and start interpreting, I guess.
In that sense, doesn't the play become then a critique of the Western philosophical tradition, in a sense?
Oh yeah, it is, and that's what Beckett points out too, and that's why he tries to divorce it from philosophy. But the very critique of philosophy comes from philosophy. That's kind of my point. Yeah.
Again, I'm sorry. It reminds me of the Dichter and Nietzsche because they both emphasize our ethics in their philosophy.
Yeah.
So I quite agree with what you have just said, that it became a critique about the philosophy because it seems that it goes beyond the ethics, which Nietzsche and Dichter teacher Levinas has proposed.
Definitely.
My question is to Jeff. Do you think that apart from Waiting for Godot, is there any other play where you can have this philosophy?
I'm sure there is. From some of the articles that I read, there was a lot of philosophy being connected back up with Beckett, but it was mostly St. Augustine and Kierkegaard, some other earlier figures, Plato for sure, Descartes. So a lot of people have been reading it with philosophy in mind, but I saw Cartesianism, but not in connection with Waiting for Godot so much. But I didn't read every single article, so. There's also, I saw Hegelianism connected up with it in The Master Slave, which makes sense. I never really saw, Estlin presents one or two sentences about Sartre and Camus. Beyond that, he doesn't really go far into it because he says the absurd's not concerned with philosophical lessons or messages, so he just kind of skips over that. But I haven't looked at too many other absurd plays, but reading Waiting for Godot numerous times, I just kept seeing it, and I kept seeing no one's responding to it, so I felt I should write it down.
My feeling is that if you read Look Back in Anger by John Osborne.
Okay, Look Back in Anger?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think that will help you in finding out other things.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Very cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for our presenters? Well, let's thank them.